Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 72 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today's reading and commentary covers Deuteronomy chapter 3, picking up in verse 21 and reading through chapter 5. Now, as I made mention yesterday, we're right now still in the section that's sort of looking back, looking at the past. And the book of Deuteronomy is broken up simplistically, I'll put it, in three different sections. There's looking at the past, looking at the present, and looking at the future. And it is really three sermons, three messages, which Moses delivers. Now, when you think about it, it's kind of ironic. This is over a month period. Moses has quite a bit to say, the book of Deuteronomy, and I don't say this in discouraging anybody over the length of it. It's pretty lengthy because it covers 34 chapters. Moses, who was the same man at one point who had stood before the burning bush and said, "Oh Lord, I'm slow of speech, send someone else." It seems that he's gotten over his slow speech, and now he is able to really put together a message, and just the Lord has laid these words on his heart to put before the children of Israel. Also, and I spoke of this yesterday, but I just want to touch on it again. Remember, Moses was pleading with the Lord, "Let me cross the Jordan, let me see and walk through this land of promise." And God told him no. And the Lord very sternly said, "Do not speak of this matter again." But the Lord did allow Moses to go up on top of the mountain and see the promised land. And I think this is just me. I'm not saying this is scriptural. I think, though, it is almost like Moses had spiritual binoculars. That's how I've always envisioned it. It's like God allowed him to see beyond just what the natural eye would have seen. As I say, that's just how I've always pictured it for myself. We see in chapter 4, he's going to revisit the whole incident with Bela Peor, and how really the parents of those whom he's now speaking to had fallen away to worship Baal, and how they had ended up having these sexual relations and with the prostitutes of Baal. Now, some of these people would have been children at the time that this event happened, but now they're the adults, now they're the parents, because their parents, not only those who participated, and keep in mind, those who participated in that Baal worship, they were put to death. It was a high price to pay for falling away from the Lord. And now they are once again being warned not to turn away. And here's the words that really are very important to keep in mind, where he says in verse 2 of chapter 4, and this is the Lord speaking through Moses, "You shall not add to the word which I'm commanding you, nor take away from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I'm commanding you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord has done in the case of Bela Peor. For all the men who followed Bela Peor, the Lord your God has destroyed them from among you. But you who held fast to the Lord your God are alive today, every one of you." Hold fast to the Lord. Don't look away. Don't easily get swayed into false worship. Don't allow yourselves to be pulled in a direction of a false god or false idol. He says in verse 5, "See, I have taught you statutes and judgments, just as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do this in the land where you are entering to possess it. So keep and do them, for that is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the people, who will hear all the statutes and say, surely this great nation is wise and an understanding people. Moses is going to point out that when the people stood before Mount Sinai and received the laws, the commands of the Lord, he's going to point out to them that they did not physically see God. And since they didn't see God, they shouldn't make or create an image of God. And, you think of today, I think of so many people who worship icons and statues. And a lot of times, if you think of like in Orthodox churches, or even in Roman Catholicism, where they'll have these pictures or these statues, or even in some cases I've seen in Mexico a mannequin in a glass sarcophagus, and the mannequin was supposed to be Jesus. Had nail prints in his hands and feet, a crown of thorns upon his head, but was laying in this glass coffin as a dead body. And people were going up and kneeling down before this glass coffin and praying to this image of Christ inside of it. And that is something that I saw about 25 years ago, and I've seen similar things to that over the years. It's heartbreaking to think that there are people, even to this day, who turn away to worship idols and to worship engraven images, which the Lord explicitly warned us not to do. When you make that image of God, whether it's a carved out image or a painting, it comes from having formed a mental image of God. And I also warn people of that as well. Because when you do this, your mind could never create the wonder and the majesty of the Lord. So you're limiting God even if you're trying to create a mental image. So guard yourself against that. We're going to end up in chapter 5 here, really of a repeat of the Ten Commandments. And again, as I made mention a few times, when we'll see in Deuteronomy some of Leviticus being repeated, it's because the events of Leviticus were, in a sense, live time. And the events of the book of Numbers were live time. And this part here in Deuteronomy is reminding the people of that which they would have heard as children, or that which their parents were taught and heard. So Moses wants to reassure that they learn from their past. And we shouldn't live in the past, but the past is there as a guide stone for us in many cases. And in many points in time, and we're going to see this when we come to the book of Joshua, where standing stones are erected. And the standing stones are there as a memorial, and it even points this out with the book of Joshua, when we see the standing stones erected after they cross the Jordan River. It's when your children ask what this is for, tell them. And that's a lot of what we see happening here, is connecting the past with the way that the people are to live now. So as you read through chapters 4 and 5 today, I want you to think about how these people are hearing these events of the past repeated. And maybe even for a child, sometimes they might remember things a little different. That child may have remembered more of like, oh, that's when my uncle died because he worshipped this statue over here. But I want you to remember now he's telling them, hey, you be careful. Because when you enter into the land of Canaan, there's a lot of false gods which the Canaanites worship. Or really, as I say, demon gods that the people in Canaan worship. And they worship these gods in horrible, horrific ways. Do not be swayed to do that. And sad to say, but when we get into Judges, we're going to see so many times the Hebrew people, the children of Israel, will fall away and worship these gods of the Canaanites. Even Solomon, when we get up to the book of Kings, we're going to see Solomon as well, or 2 Samuel, we're going to see Solomon fall away and worship these false gods, these foreign gods that his wives have brought in. Guard your hearts and make sure that the Lord God is your King. As I have made mention over the last week, make sure that He is the owner of your life, not just a visitor, not just somebody renting a room out in your heart, but that He controls your heart and your life. Brothers and sisters, I do hope that this has been a good day for you. Until tomorrow, God bless.